The game definitely lived up to the hype. Ohio State beats Michigan, and it's the first time in 6 years that we've said that, which is very strange. Feels like Ohio State's had enough success where they shouldn't have gone 6 years from beating Michigan, but they did that. The game was great. The physicality was there. The heated rivalry, the arguments, the pushing, the shoving, the snow. Everything about this game was fun, entertaining, and had the intensity that we long for in college football. I think we talk about college football and how much it's changing, but we also have to take a step back a couple of times a year to appreciate what's still there. These rivalry games have been so good. And this game, particularly, has been really fun over the years. And today, it was another example of Ohio State and Michigan not liking each other and playing a fun game of football to watch. It was a game where we saw a number of different things. Ohio State had to deal with communication issues, and the Buckeyes were still down to business as usual. And when you look at this game, one of the things that we talked about was what we're going to see from the star players. Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate were missing some games recently, and we wondered if they were going to be able to go. They go, and they were clearly the difference. When you look at what happened today, the difference was Ohio State's athleticism. And Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith played huge roles in that. Both had touchdown catches, and when they needed a big play, it was their big time players that stepped up. Smith was very good. Carnell Tate had a big 50-yard touchdown that kind of broke the game open. And once again, Julian Sayin looked good. I thought that he played with a ton of poise, even when things weren't exactly going his way. I thought he did a great job of keeping calm and just going with what Ryan Day and Brian Hartline were calling. I don't think that he got rattled. I don't think that he got worried about what was happening. Ohio State had a lot of things going for them in the passing attack because Sayin just continued to stick with the process. And one of the biggest reasons why they're going to be dangerous is obviously the obvious things, the Jeremiah Smith, the Carnell Tate part of the things, but Julian Sayin is the big X factor for that offense. He continues to show us exactly why. If he continues playing the way that he does, they're going to be impossible to beat. And next week they got a big one against Indiana, but for now, this is where you really want to point to as this is exactly what they needed from him. Now, like I said, the athleticism was the difference. But I have to admit that I was impressed with Ohio State's offensive line. They didn't have a ton of examples this year where they dominated good competition. In fact, when you look at the competition that they played, there weren't a ton of examples where you saw good or elite defensive line play. So I can admit that I was wrong on that. I think that Ohio State was much better than I anticipated them to be. And even though they had their moments, their lapses, I thought they did a great job in pass pro. And also, even though they struggled in run blocking early, I thought they did a great job of really pouring it on in the second half. They were dominating the line of scrimmage in the second half. Bo Jackson, it felt like he was getting chunk yards after chunk yards, picking up big yardage when Ohio State needed it to run out the clock. And that was huge for Ohio State to be able to continue winning the line of scrimmage, continue being physical, and continue winning this football game. So that was a huge thing I think that I noticed. The defense obviously did its part, and Matt Patricia deserves a lot of recognition for what he has been able to do this year. He has been a big reason why this team's had so much success outside of the offense obviously doing its part. Matt Patricia has been able to confuse a lot of opposing offenses. And again, I don't think that Ohio State's played a ton of elite offenses, but it's given them time to really gel and really gain that chemistry. So when they come to these big games, they are able to execute and play at a high level. And I think that's going to make them dangerous in the playoff. They're probably going to be the top seed. We'll talk about Indiana in a little while, but I don't necessarily know if Indiana is capable of beating this Ohio State team with what we've seen. Again, more on that later, but this is an Ohio State team that looks as good as we've seen. And that's with a ton of turnover on both sides of the ball. The defense obviously did its part as well. And the defense made life difficult for Bryce Underwood. And I thought that Bryce Underwood overall continues to do a great job of being poised and in control of his emotions, of his reads, but there were times where you can tell his internal clock got sped up. The pressure that Ohio State was able to get on him, or at least make him feel, kind of sped some things up. And for Bryce Underwood to grow, there are some things that we've seen this year that he still needs to do better. I think that he's having a good freshman season. There's a lot of things that he's done that most freshmen don't do. He also needs some help. But one of the things that we saw was he was taking checkdowns before allowing his first or maybe even second reads to get open, to get through their route. And there were a number of times where he missed some wide open receivers downfield. Now, again, the consistency at which those wide receivers get open hasn't always been there. So that's also a part of it. If you don't have consistent wide receiver talent that can get separation, you're probably going to go to your check down. You're probably going to look at, hey, well, I usually don't have this guy over the middle. I don't have this guy deep, so I'm not going to look for him. I'm going to go to the check down. Now, when he did that a couple of times, the running backs dropped the ball, so it's almost like, well, what was the point? But again, part of that is you have to give Matt Patricia a ton of credit. Speeding up that internal clock made Bryce Underwood go to his checkdowns quicker than maybe he needed to, and preventing him from making some big-time throws. And he made some throws in this game. I thought that he did a great job in certain moments to thread the ball through tight windows, and did a great job of showing that even though he's a freshman, he can handle the big moments. And I think that Michigan is going to be a fun team to watch if Bryce Underwood can take that next step. If he can get more development and learn from his experience this year. That's going to be something that we'll talk about in their season recap. But Bryce Underwood in this game, I think that overall there were some things that he could have done better, but at the same time, it wasn't all on him. Again, wide receiver is going to be something I'm very curious to see what Michigan does in the transfer portal. Are they going to be able to get a wide receiver to come in? Andrew Marsh has been, I think, a really fun player for them in terms of giving them a difference maker, but at the same time, I don't necessarily know if that's going to be enough. Maybe you get tight end talent to be part of it as well, but when your quarterback's 8 of 18 for 63 yards, I think that that's going to be a tough thing to overcome. And yes, he did make a couple of good throws, but there were also multiple throws that he left on the table. Part of that is the environment, the snow coming down, it's cold, but also this is a Michigan offense that has to play better, and there's some pressure on Jerome Moore to be able to do that, because this is not a game that you should feel good about if you're Michigan. There were some things you can feel positive about, but Ohio State largely dominated this game, and there was a clear difference at who was the better team, and that's something that you have to figure out going forward, because the Michigan losses are not hanging over Ryan Day's head anymore. You don't have that element when it comes to this game. You have to find ways to get better athletes, because Ohio State clearly was the more athletic team, the better team, and that did them a lot of wonders today, and it was clear that they were the better team. You could see that from early on. Obviously, Michigan got off to a good start, but once Ohio State settled in, it was very clear who had the better athletes, who was going to win this game, and for Michigan, you have to find a way to improve that. But again, this is exactly what I think college football fans want. You want an intense game. You want a game that, again, even though it felt like Ohio State was in control, it felt like the game was still, everybody was still a little anxious about it. There were things going wrong. Again, the communication system for Ohio State in the second half was not working. Now, whether or not you want to go into the conspiracy theory or not, but it is your choice. But this is, I think, a part of this series that just is another thing to talk about. So Ohio State looking really good going into the playoff, going into the Big Ten championship. Michigan, I think they have a lot of exciting things to look at going forward. Their quarterback is going to be really fun to watch if he can take those steps in his development and if he can get some more help around him. This was not obviously Michigan's best team, but the performance that they put together this year, still pretty impressive. And if Bryce Underwood can get to a place where he is better and the wide receiver talent can help him out, or the pass catching talent, this is going to be a dangerous team in 2026. But for now, you're on the outside looking in. You're focused on the bowl game. You're focused on what you can do for 2026. For Ohio State, you are well on your way to winning a potential national championship. That is going to be very fun to watch. This is going to be a tough team to beat. I'm very curious to see how they do in the Big Ten championship as well as in that college football playoff.